Well, I think the biggest issue for everybody, not just West Berkshire, is austerity. The fact that we have no money for the services we think we should provide as a society, let alone have no money for the things we desire as a society. And it's the whole reason I'm standing in this election, is to bring about awareness of the fact that we don't have to carry on the way we are. There's a strange system whereby government can only gain money to pay for services, either through taxation or, when the tax money's run out, borrowing money from the banks. The bit that people don't fully understand is that the banks, and when I say banks, I'm not talking about your high street branch where you pay in your cheques or set up your standing orders. The big glass towers in the City of London and on Wall Street, banks, when governments go to the banks and say we need to borrow money, the banks just tap a few keys on a computer and create that money out of thin air. It's a difficult concept for everyone to get their heads round, but that's effectively what happens. But then the government borrows that money, we have to pay interest on it, and we have at some point to pay that money back. What I'm trying to bring about is a notion that we change who owns the money. The government own the money, and we can have money for our needs and desires. What we need to do is nationalise our money supply. Well, I think that's really quite simple. We'll have all the best bits of everything we've enjoyed from our time in the EU without any of the bad bits. That's going to be the best deal for us. Well, it goes back to same really as the first question. Austerity is the problem that we suffer in trying to provide frontline services. It's finding the money in order to provide all the services we need. We just need to take control of our money supply. I'm sorry to keep banging on that drum, but that's what I'm here for, and that's what I want to see happen. Well, I think I've already set my stall out on where I think the problem lies, and the NHS, I think, is that frontline service. It's probably the frontline service that we all depend on. And so the same again, we need to own our own money, pay through the health service, put the money into circulation, pay our nurses direct from government. There doesn't need to be a crisis in the NHS, and the same doesn't need to be a crisis in any of our frontline services. If we take control of the money, put the banks to one side, we have all we need. Well, short of finding a raft of housing that nobody's noticed lying empty, I can't see that any immediate solution can be brought to book. Even if we did find homes for everybody, there would still always be someone who's homeless. People find themselves in difficult circumstances immediately, and the solution isn't immediate. But again, and I'm sorry, the answer has got to be more funding. We're only going to have more funding if we change the way we're doing things now. Certainly not. I think there's a certain community aspect to sitting down together and having a meal, and the teachers with the children. I mean, that's part of being at school and part of being a member of society. There is no need to be cutting away school meals. We have all the money we want in the world if only we go back to the issue I've been banging on. We need to own the money. All school children should get meals. Senior school. I used to love my school dinners, and that was the best part of the day. So again, everybody's looking for things to get rid of without looking at what the answers could possibly be. Well, I think the question answers itself. It is a necessity at the moment, the way things are in the world, with North Korea and Iran striving to develop their own nuclear weapons, I think now is the wrong time to be throwing ours on the scrap heap. I think as well, part and parcel of the issue with the whole Trident question is that people are worried again about how we're paying for this, and it's not actually the Trident missiles that we're talking about spending millions and millions of pounds on, billions of pounds on. It's the ageing Vanguard submarines that are sort of falling to bits in their dry dock that need replacing. And the notion of replacing them, I think, is a very worthwhile thing to do, because if we are going to keep a nuclear arsenal and we are going to keep them in a state where they're ready to be used, the last place they need to be when they're armed, ready to be set off, is next to large cities. They want to be in a submarine in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. If they go pop in the tube there, okay, we're going to be very sad to lose a sub crew, but they'll do a lot less damage there than they will if they're on land. So the issue is about the submarines, not the missiles. The ethics of, are they a good thing? I actually believe we have nuclear weapons not to stop other countries doing bad things to us, to stop our own governments doing silly things that will then escalate into a nuclear war. I think we have to go ahead with the Trident lease that we got. It's got another 15 odd years to run, so we're not going to sort of stop that overnight. I think if we're going to keep them, we should renew the subs. And we can do that if we take control of the money. Well, I wasn't actually aware that we have a ban on fox hunting, so that's news to me. I think what people have to understand is in order to have secure our food supply, we've changed the environment in which foxes live. We've eradicated their competitors effectively and handed them a food basket of ready-made meals, and the farmers, I think, need to keep some control on the foxes. The use of horses and hounds, I suspect, is the question you're asking me. And yes, that is contentious, but the hounds have a part to play as well within the sort of farming community. Livestock dies just because it wants to. Farmers use the packs to get rid of dead livestock. We don't want to bury them because that contaminates the land. It's expensive if they have to be taken away and cremated. The hounds serve a purpose. I understand people's distaste of hounds catching foxes and the consequence of that, and yes, I don't think that should be allowed to come back. But there is a use for the hunting world and the hounds. They are part of the ecosystem that we all depend on for our food stuff. I'm not against the notion of grammar schools. I know people have issue with the notion of selection and hiving off the best amongst us to study elsewhere, but I think if you've got exceptional children, then they should be allowed to thrive. If you've got somebody who's good at ballet, nobody complains about them going to a ballet school. If we've got people who are clever, I don't really see why people should object to them being taken and challenged in their learning. What we need, if we're going to survive in this world, in a global world, is we need bright, clever, educated people to take the lead. And I don't really see that we should deprive them of the best education they can have. And so long, of course, that doesn't detract from other schools and funding to them, that they all get the absolute best that we can offer. A difficult one this, in that as part of my notion of monetary reform, I believe that people should be able to keep their liquid asset, their money. The thing I would change is people being able to keep and hand on large clumps of property. I think that's where the inheritance tax system falls down. People should be allowed to pass on their wealth, but they shouldn't be allowed to hoard homes. So we've got landlords who have enormous portfolios of property, who then just pass that on to their children, and we're all held at ransom to their needs. So what I would change is the ability to sort of just glibly hand over huge estates of houses that have been built and just bought en masse by hugely wealthy landlords. I would set a system where you can leave one house to one child or one grandchild. So we're not penalising people. Their family home isn't an issue. They can leave that to all their children or one of their children if they've got a family home. What I think is wrong with the inheritance tax system is that we're taking relatively small amounts of money off people who've spent their whole lives saving in favour of people who've spent sometimes none of their lives working and saving and are just living off the efforts of everybody else. So that would be the thing I'd change in terms of inheritance. When you ask would I do away with inheritance tax, I would on all other things. I don't think it's necessary. If we change the money, then we have enough without the need for taxation at all. In many regards, we can put the money into circulation through government spending. So there's no need to take people's life savings, no.